There's this huge double standard. The people who are arguing to demask ICE agents are never arguing to demask different rioters and protesters who are constant agitators at different protests and riots. So it's hard to take these same politicians seriously when they're crying about ICE agents wearing masks. I'm kind of sick of Palestine season. I'm ready for the next fucking thing.
Why we were sick of it?
Because I want like ICE protests already. The Palestine protests are making me miss abortion, bro. I miss, dude, the simpler days with the Women's March and all that shit. No, and then, Roe v. Wade with the abortion stuff. And then Kavanaugh, there were a lot of protests following that. But no, now we have it's Israel stuff nonstop. It's coming up on 2 years, I think. Maybe even 3.
2 years.
Since October 7th.
I think this would be the 3rd year. Someone was asking me, what do you think of the No Kings protest? And I was like, I've seen
Who gives
way
a, I mean,
worse. Like, no one gives a shit about some like 70-year-old mom from Vermont holding like an anti-Trump sign. Let's start at all things immigration. You spend a lot of times at the immigration courts. The visuals are obviously jarring. You see all these people getting dragged out. Talk to me about just the dynamic, like what goes on there day to day.
Awesome. So I think first it's worth talking about like immigration as a topic and how it plays into our current political reality. So President Trump, the number one issue that President Trump ran on and that Trump supporters are concerned about is immigration. He promised mass deportations constantly. You could pull up all the rally clips of him calling for mass migration. So that to begin with is what made this topic so fascinating and really part of the forefront and part of why I chose to cover it so closely. So it's mostly happening in California and New York, I guess, or Los Angeles in particular. Cities with big Hispanic or non-U.S. citizen, illegal cities with a lot of illegal aliens per se. And this is a change within the Trump administration that Trump put forth a new executive order. And it's about expedited removal. If you were here in the past 2 years, then you are eligible for expedited removal and they could essentially just grab you and deport you. And that's what we're seeing go on in different courts around the country, mostly in LA and New York City. So for example, at 26 Federal Plaza, there's about a half dozen courts between two buildings over there. These are federal immigration courts, and you'll have something like 6 to a dozen ICE, ATF, Border Patrol agents waiting outside the immigration courtrooms. They have their administrative warrants. They know who they're looking for, and they just grab these guys, detain them, and get them prepared for deportation.
Do they wait for their cases to go awry? Or like, how does the dynamic work?
So many times, no, they don't. If you've been here in the past, if you got here in the last 2 years and you don't have your papers in order showing that you've been here for longer than that, then it doesn't matter if your case will be up or not. They'll grab you despite that. There's a range of different I guess they do show some discernment because there are a range of things that'll get you on their list to be deported. And it's not like everybody who shows up to the immigration court is deported despite not having their papers.
I'm curious about the sanctuary city of it all specifically, because the biggest talking point is that ICE cannot operate in New York City because it's a sanctuary state and all of that stuff. How do they operate given that?
So they definitely at least are able to operate in the federal buildings.
Gotcha.
So at the federal immigration courts, But I'm unsure. I actually don't believe they are able to work within the prison systems.
Gotcha.
So like ICE, as I understand now, isn't able to access like Rikers, where there's a lot of criminal illegal aliens that the president would like to go after. They tried to work out a deal with Mayor Adams. I'd need to check on what the latest is about that. But I found that if you're a mayor of a liberal city and you try to posture against ICE, against the president, against DHS, they're going to double down and then like flood the zone in your area. So recently the ICE director, Director Lyons, was told by like Mayor Wu in Boston, like, you're not welcome here and ICE won't be allowed here. And he said, you know what? We're just going to flood the zone. We're going to send a ton of agents to your city and deport criminal illegal aliens.
In these hearings I've seen in your video specifically, while these people are getting dragged out, there's a lot of like journalists who are telling them not to talk to the camera. Who are these people?
Sure. Oh man, it's such a crazy
like,
dynamic scene.
So high schooly.
So
like,
let me try to break it down.
Cops, people dragging him, and obviously you feel bad for these people. And then someone's whispering in their ear, it's like, "Hey, lift your head up." And I'm like, "There's a lot of going on."
Yeah, so there's a lot of different characters in these videos playing different roles, and it's very interesting. So I guess let me explain it here. So in New York City, most of the press here is liberal. And in the immigration courts, I guess, let me break this down more simply. There are a lot of different characters. There are the reporters who are mostly liberal. Then there are different immigration activists who go there under the cover of being so-called court observers.
Okay.
Anybody, due to our First Amendment rights, is able to go to these court hearings and just observe. It's a part of our First Amendment right to do so. They show up under the guise of being court observers, but they are really there to try to agitate and obstruct and get in the way of the business of ICE. It's usually a lot of different immigration activist groups who encourage their members to show up. And then there's also different legal progressive nonprofit groups like NYLAG, which sends in these pro bono lawyers who won't be he won't be representing anybody, but like as they're getting dragged away, he'll remind them that they have the right to not say anything. As if like in that moment while ICE is dragging you away, like you'll be able to get out of it. Like he's telling them, yeah, you have the right to remain silent. The ICE is about to take them onto a plane. I don't think if anything they'll do or say is going to get in that way. But to your point about the press they're extremely sympathetic to the migrants. You'll see sometimes they'll have the wrong person and they'll speak to them. They'll get their information and be like, oh, you're not the wrong guy. We'll let you go. And then the reporters will go up to them, rub their back and be like, oh, it'll be okay. You'll be all right. They're all really actually hostile towards me as well because they perceive me to be
At this time, have you made the rounds and people know who you are?
Yeah, they're familiar with me, but they also just... Man, these people think they're superheroes fighting Nazis. Like the reporters there think these ICE agents are the Gestapo and that they are, they talk trash to them. They get in their way. They think they're witnessing the Gestapo firsthand and like them being hostile towards them or them being sympathetic to the people that they're grabbing. They think they're superheroes and that, I'm generally supportive of what the president ran on. They view me in a hostile manner.
Staying on the Gestapo of it all, there's a lot of conversations regarding them wearing masks. And you have asked folks at ICE, why are they wearing masks? The obvious optics is pretty jarring that, hey, people who are wearing masks, pulling up out of nowhere, dragging people in their vans and going away. Who are these people? What are their badge number? This can literally be someone who just put on a mask, put on a vest, and just like taking Hispanic people from Home Depot away. Talk to me about the masks.
Dude, I think the masks are horrible optics.
Yeah.
I understand that ICE has a very difficult job and they are being doxxed and they are being threatened online. I follow different groups, immigration activist groups online that do threaten and dox them and put pictures of them and ask for more information regarding these ICE agents to try to intimidate them. Their goal is to demoralize different ICE agents, trying to get people not to join, trying to make it, a higher threshold to want to get involved. But my view on this is that like being an ICE agent's a tough job. Being in any law enforcement agency is very tough work. And it comes with a certain amount of risks. These guys are strapped with firearms like all the time. So like, I think the optics of it isn't worth what they are trying to do, which is prevent being threatened online. I think a lot of that is overwrought and exaggerated. However, when I spoke to ICE director Todd Lyons, I believe his name is, about this in particular, he said he doesn't support the masking, but he's not going to dissuade the agents from wearing masks because he understands that these agents are getting threats and it's protecting themselves by having these masks. But again, I don't think the optics of it all is worth having the mask on. I criticize protesters when they have masks.
Yeah.
Director Lyons also said, a lot of the times they have their badge numbers showing, and therefore if people wanted more information about the agents, they can get it from their badge number. And a lot of the times they do have their badges showing, but I've experienced 20-25% of the time, if you look through enough of my coverage of this, where they don't even have their badges showing. And, I've had a lot of horrible interactions with people on the streets who are masked up and are able to threaten and intimidate me as a result of it, where there's no accountability following that. So I think it's a grave concern, bad optics for them, but they made the calculation that it's worth letting the agents do to protect themselves and their families.
People who are in the field, vis-a-vis journalists, people who work in politics, they can brush off optics concerns. But to the normie voter, optics matters a lot, as you know. Even if you go back to why did the country overwhelmingly vote against illegal immigration and border crossing? Because the optics of a shit ton of people crossing the border was way too jarring for them to ignore, right? And then the country swung in a way which was against that. And right now, the concern regarding the mask is just like Americans reacted, like the normie Americans reacted to the border crossing by voting for Trump, they will react to random people pulling up wearing masks against that, even though, that is not in their interest. How do you make sense of that?
Okay, so to be fair, I'd say it's like roughly 80% of the agents that I've seen that are wearing masks on duty, they're examples of agents who don't. I do think, though, that this mask narrative is over-exaggerated, like the issue of it. I think the ICE agents aren't I guess, overstepping their mandate. We haven't seen videos of masked ICE agents beating up illegal immigrants, which I feel like some people would lead you to believe. I think the people who care about this story are like already anti-ICE activists. Also, there's this huge double standard. The people who are arguing to demask ICE agents are never arguing to demask different rioters and protesters who are constant agitators at different protests and riots. So it's hard to take these same politicians seriously. ICE, they tripled their budget, and now they have the largest budget of any like law enforcement group, say except the military of the United States and China.
I think Ezra was talking about it. Ezra Klein, obviously.
Two New York Times listeners here. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. That might be a red flag. I don't know. Where's that New York Times sponsor?
I know, right? At the end of the day, we live in New York. We have to listen to the Times, whatever. Do you think that has been wisely used? Because obviously it's a talking point. What do you make of the flooding the zone argument?
I think it's a great thing. I think immigration law in our country has been abused for so long, and Americans are sick of it. Of all backgrounds, of Hispanics who came here illegally, Asians who've come here illegally, Canadians who've come here illegally, Europeans who've come here illegally. They're sick of our laws being taken advantage of. And then I think people are sick of seeing the double standards of where laws are enforced and where they aren't enforced. And then we have sanctuary cities where you're allowed to commit certain crimes and other areas where you aren't. So that's what Trump was elected on. So I think he should actually continue doubling and tripling down. As a matter of like politics, I feel as though this is one of President Trump's most popular things to continue hammering home on.
Do you think like we overinterpret the mandate regarding immigration? Because like in you and I circle, we obviously talk about immigration in a way which is favorable to Trump's agenda. Do you think, once again, my concern is the normie American. Like normie Americans, like they don't think it through. Like they see things, and if it looks jarring, if it looks mean, they will vote against that.
I think on this issue that the Republicans are most in touch with the American public on. If there's any issue that that Republicans are spot on with where the American public is, I think it's immigration. And to speak to that point, the Democrats have been running left on the immigration issue since Bill Clinton. But Bill Clinton, a relatively moderate, Democrat, used to run on wanting to deport illegal immigrants and building a wall. So I believe most Americans, they don't want to see people able to break the law, come in here, and then the associated crime that comes with it. There's also an element of trying to prevent drug runners and prevent different crime from coming over the border. So fentanyl is a serious issue, but it was also used to fearmonger and help encourage more anti-illegal immigration sentiment among the American public.
Zooming out a little bit, there's this whole debate regarding just immigration in general, within the right specifically. There's this aspect of, I think it's pushback if you disagree. I think there's an aspect of broader protectionism within the American right. Everything which is going wrong in America is because we are too sympathetic towards the rest of the world, vis-a-vis trade, vis-a-vis immigration, and we need to overcorrect that. So now we need to be concerned about not only illegal immigration, but also legal immigration and people who are coming in, 6,000 Chinese kids coming into American schools and all of that stuff. Where do you think let's call it the mean GOP voter, the mean Bannon listener stands on all things immigration?
I feel like the mean Bannon voter or Bannon listener and same the mean thing. Like Republican might not be the same thing. Yeah. I do think that there is I don't even mean xenophobia with a negative connotation. There's a sentiment of xenophobia because I think that the American public has seen immigration law abused for so long that it's making them feel as though they need to stop legal immigration as well. And I think you're seeing more of the right become more sympathetic to that argument until we understand what the hell's going on in our country. I feel like a lot of Americans feel as though we do not know what is happening in our country anymore. And until we have the country on lock and everything is back to a feeling of normalcy, they'll want to not only stop illegal immigration, but move on to the legal immigration as well. I feel like what exemplified this conflict on the right most was that Vivek Ramaswamy tweet about
December.
I forgot exactly what it was, but he was somewhat dismissive of Americans who are struggling to get work. Was that ingrained into your brain?
I know exactly what it was because my people. I know that specifically because the guy who was in the forefront of this was this guy called Sriram Krishnan, who was working at A16Z. Funny enough, he and I used to work together. I know him. I know his work. Yeah, we're all just together, right? You're Jewish. What are you talking about?
Of course. It's a small club.
It's a small club. So he gets into Trump administration as an AI czar working for Saks. And all these clips come out from his podcast where he's talking about green card caps. It's very niche. It's basically if you're born in India or China, even if you qualify for a green card, you will be in a 20 or 10-year wait. And he's saying that, oh, that's discrimination. We need to raise that. We need to lift the caps away. That gets taken as he's in favor of H-1B. He's Indian. He wants Indians here, whatever. And then that becomes a Twitter circle. Vivek chimes in and boom. He was
dismissive of Americans.
He was
I forgot what
that's the point. The point was American culture of high school and watching TV shows is bad. You should be more like Indians who take sword fighting lessons, who go do poetry, who do math Olympiads. If you are more like that, you will get jobs. And came off as finger wagging, came off as the brown teacher's pet telling the normal jock what to do and all that. And that's when I think that was a pretty good, like, I'm caricaturing this, but that was an inflection point where the right was like, oh no, we have to buckle up about legal immigration as well.
I don't think Americans want immigrants who come to preach about the culture and countries that they come from. I think Americans want legal immigrants to come to this country and assimilate to our great country and great culture that we already have here and add to it in that aspect. So I think that's why there was some sort of apathy, visceral reaction to that.
I actually face a lot of this. I don't know if you know this, I host events in the city for legal immigrants who are like building companies. It's a very small cohort niche. It's called Making in America. It's very rah, red, white, and blue. I had this debate with this lawyer who came to my event, and she was saying, this is a little too red, white, and blue. I thought this would be more like citizens of the world, UN type gathering, and not, rah, Republican type. And I was like, I'm not trying to be Republican here. I'm just trying to say people are coming here to build for America, and they have an active duty towards building the country, not becoming their own enclave within America. And I think that's one of the biggest push and pull, especially within the legal immigrant group, because for the longest time, there was this license, let's call it, to, be Mindy Kaling types when you move to America. And now there's an active conversation regarding assimilation, which I 100% welcome.
It's fascinating. We'll see where this goes. I think Vivek Ramaswamy, now running for governor in Ohio, is ultimately going to win. JD Vance is a good chance at being president, and his wife is an Indian
that's where
American,
it gets nasty,
which is fascinating too. And there's been a lot of, questioning of JD Vance's white bona fides, if he's willing to.
What do you make of it?
I try not to judge other people for misogynation.
I think that's when I lose the right a little bit. Like, if you are like fucking up JD fucking Vance because his wife is brown, like, that's where you're losing me a little bit.
I don't want to have a double standard when it comes to this stuff as well, though. I am a Jewish American, and I hope to find a Jewish wife in particular, and that's very important to me and my culture. And that I'd also preach that to many other Jewish people. If somebody who's a white Catholic only wants to date a white Catholic, or wants to date a Hindu, or what have you, then that's go do what you want. But
what do you make of like the current right's obsession with all things culture?
I don't want to be over inclusive and say this is all people on the right.
I think there's online phenomenon.
Phenomena, but I don't know what to make of it. Frankly, I don't know how much if I believe like are these real people, and what is their impact on real politics? No, it is obviously real people. I don't believe most of I don't mean this in like a negative or positive, like or racist or misogynistic. I don't know, that language is so coded now, but it's hard to take stuff that you read online and know how much it translates to the real world and real people, because what I see represented in our government isn't often represented in the stuff I'm seeing online, or my neighbors don't seem to talk like a lot of the things or stuff that I see online.
Saying on that, I think it's...
And I mean, the same is true also for the left. For the left. I don't see, card-carrying communists who are preaching about how awesome Luigi Mangione is, or that we need communism now in most of the country outside of New York City. I think there's a bubble.
TLDR, touch grass.
Yeah.
Staying on immigration, Trump said he's A-okay with 600,000 Chinese immigrants coming to American school system. It's a classic fell for it award for the online right. What do you think Trump truly believes in that regard? Because he's very obviously vocal about all things illegal immigration. Where do you think he sees his role in just legal immigration, and does he not share the concern of that mean bad voter?
So, not to make this episode dated immediately, and I only know this right now because I'm a White House correspondent for Timcast as well, but I do believe that the White House sent out a memo yesterday, walking that back, actually, that the president was not increasing the number to 600,000, but it's still an interesting topic to harp on I'd love to talk about. So I think let's zoom out and talk about what the issue is at hand first. If you zoom out, it's roughly 300,000 Chinese nationals come to our country on student visas, going to a litany of different universities. I went to the university at Buffalo. Almost felt like the third of the student population was either Indian or Chinese or something. These students pay full price to be here. Yeah. They're mostly upper middle class or upper class Chinese nationals who come here to do it. I'm not exactly sure how many of those spots they're taking from Americans, but one of the arguments is that they're taking spots from Americans. They're paying full cost tuition, which is a huge subsidy to these colleges. And if the President Trump were to immediately reverse and revoke all of these visas, half of these schools that receive so many of these immigrants will go out of business. So that's one element to this. I think this is also playing into the trade policy deal that the president is trying to leverage now with President Xi in China. And additionally to that, there is this element of the Bannon right that's been talking about how these 300,000 Chinese nationals have the potential to be Chinese spies in our country for some time now. So there's like so many different issues of trade, national security, and politics that come into play here. I think if we were to revoke it down to zero, it would be a really huge concern, like a geopolitical concern of the geopolitical direction that we're going to with China. If, we're reaching the point where we don't trust any Chinese nationals to be in our country. Having said all that, I do think there is a national security concern when it comes to 300,000 Chinese nationals here on student visas, and it'll be used as a political football to come for many more years in the trade negotiations and national security concerns.
What do you think Trump truly believes about this specifically? Because it's like no one has any doubts regarding what Stephen Miller believes about immigration, but Trump goes from talking about stapling a green card on anybody who graduates from a U.S. school to talking about 600,000 Chinese immigrants in U.S. colleges. But I feel like to the outsider, to the normie, it doesn't feel like he shares the same larger immigration project view of the JDs and the Stephen Millers of the world.
That's the $1 million question. Like, what is President Trump thinking on any given particular issue? And the people around him, there's dynamic views on a lot of the things that he talks about. Man, it's really tough to say. More to your point, also President Trump at one point was talking about how they are going to stop doing ICE raids on different agriculture and hospitality businesses
because to work at his hotels.
And then he walked it back once those businesses pushed back. So I think President Trump is dynamic at how he deals with these issues and is flexible, politically flexible. Some say that's too pragmatic and he's not deeply ideological enough. I think that he wants to deal with illegal immigration, but once you get into the legal immigration stuff is where it gets more murky for him. I believe it's great that Stephen Miller is there to make sure he stays on track, though, when it comes to the immigration issue, because this is the issue that I do believe was the top issue that he really did run on and hammered home about constantly.
How do you think this is different from Trump circa 2016 regarding how immigration is going on?
I feel as though Trump had his training wheels on for his first term. I don't blame him. He wasn't very familiar with the levers of government. He wasn't somebody who was heavily involved in politics before that. I feel like he knows exactly what he is doing right now, and everything was planned out a lot better. He's also led by his great chief of staff, Susie Wiles, who he constantly refers to as the most powerful woman in the world. So I think in this term, he has a great team around him who's willing to help get the things he wants to get done instead of people getting in the way of him trying to do those things.
Also, Trump 2016 was so much focused, vis-a-vis immigration, was so much focused on just the border wall and what we're doing at the southern border, which was a decent concern to have. But now it's more about the national project. How do you think the new right sees this in a way which bleeds into nativist conversation and what even is the American project? You're Jewish. There's a lot of push and pull regarding what does it mean to be anyone who is an hyphenated American, to quote Teddy Roosevelt, in America. Where do you think the right lies there?
It's an interesting conversation. I think nativists like to project onto President Trump what they'd like him to be, and oftentimes it doesn't exactly match up. I think there's a fascinating conversation on the right now about what it means to be an American and how to quantify that, and whether it's important to quantify that. I believe some people quantify that in how long has your family been here. I disagree with that. I think what it means to be an American is how much you believe in American values, including the Constitution, and how much you are willing to continue supporting that in our country. I believe citizenship is a core part of that as well. I don't think your Americanness is based on specifically just how many generations of your family has been here. For example, like, I don't know, if somebody is a second generation immigrant who full-heartedly believes in the Constitution and American values, are they less American than somebody whose family's been here since the Mayflower but believes that the Constitution is a white supremacist construct and that all our founders are white supremacists and is a communist and wants to, a revolutionary, wants to see the country overthrown? I believe the more American person would be the second generation immigrant who believes in the values of our country.
To that, I would say there are plenty of, Chinese Republicans at MAGA rallies who I'm pretty sure you have came across, who are way more capital P patriotic than white liberals from Greenwich, Connecticut. So like there's no limiting factor to this argument.
I do struggle though, back to the Chinese nationals here on student visas.
I didn't want to harp on like the China of it all. I'm just saying like ethnic MAGA supporters.
I don't want to completely dismiss the concerns though, because I do think there is validity to a lot of them. I do really think there is a national security concern when it comes to Chinese nationals, just the way that their country, their communist government is set up. They're willing to like threaten family members of people if they're doing things that they don't like abroad. They're trying to push the party line, the Communist Party line here in America. They're heavily involved in our politics. So I think it's something to be worried about. There are multiple news reports of different students here on Chinese visas who sell, educational, not secrets, but different things that they learn in these colleges, different things that are proprietary, different intellectual property that they're able to get their hands on back to China. We are concerned about an eventual conflict with China. I'm not saying what we did during World War II is right or wrong with the Japanese in internment camps, but I could foresee our country being so concerned if we were to go to war to pull something like that again. So it's just something to, prevent us having to do down the line potentially.
I was looking into this, like examples when the government had to actually step in because the country wasn't assimilating. And during World War I, there was this case with Germans in Texas where a lot of people who fled Germany came here. They were speaking German. They were only talking to their kids in German. They had their own religious enclaves. They were only eating German foods. And there was this sentiment of anti-German vis-a-vis all things World War I. But at the same time, the government actively realized that there needs to be a cohesive aspect regarding how we're building this country. So they were forced to not just be siloed. And I think that had a net positive in how the German community integrated in Texas. If you go to those areas right now, there are still German architecture or German food. That doesn't take away the heritage aspect of it, but they assimilate within the larger project. I think some version of that is due at a national scale, or at least needs to be talked about. And it's fraught right now because any conversation in that realm can be considered very easily as, like whatever, racist, what have you. But I think something like that is due given the fact that we are on a scale of 350 million people.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many different examples throughout American history of stuff like this. For example, when the Catholics first got here, there was, as I understand, a lot of bigotry and laws enforced against Catholics. You weren't able to sell your homes sell your homes to Catholics, among other things. I believe when John F. Kennedy was running for president, they questioned if his loyalty would be to the United States or to the Vatican, ultimately. But I think it's also reasonable to question how if the difference in how Germans assimilate in America versus how Muslim immigrants from some Middle Eastern countries who values not only don't align with American values, but are oftentimes antithetical to American values can assimilate. So I don't know if these two groups would do exactly the same in our country here over the generations. And I think that's like a serious question to ask.
That's a very fair point, and that matters not only because of the cultural aspect, but also the timing aspect. Those groups which we're talking about, the Irish, the WASPs, the Germans who moved here, they moved in a time when this country was nothing. And they were not coming here to then send money back to their respective countries. They were coming here because this was their only promise of like a life and making sure that kids have a life. And that was their version of American dream. And it is arguable to the point of economic migration and people who are moving in here to chase a life. I am one of them who moved here 10 years ago. They are doing that just to cash in on what America is or to build America as a project. And that conversation is due. And to the extent where, I think it's 100% fair concern. Like if you go in particular pockets of America, you will not recognize that as America. I went back to UK to meet a couple of my family members last year. Parts of London do not look like London. That is a concern. I'm not saying that it needs to look white per se, but there's a cultural aspect which is not getting talked about.
Yeah, I do think we need to recognize that. I mean, a lot of people are talking about like a net zero immigration, an assimilation period of 5-10 years to really get back and let that American culture flourish and let all those people that have been coming in here illegally or legally, I mean, I guess they'd want to get rid of the illegally ones, to really assimilate. But I mean, there's also a lot of arguments for immigration. We could run through them very quickly. We're going through a population crunch right now. It wouldn't be a bad thing for us to bring in a lot of young workers. If we don't have the bottom age bracket of our economy, then it's a bubble that's going to blow up in our face. Nobody will be able to pay into Social Security or anything like that. I also think there's something worth mentioning about how most of the immigrants who do come here are the most skilled and brilliant of the immigrants in that country.
It's a brain drain.
So the Indians in our country are generally some of the best Indians. And you could correct me if I'm wrong about this stuff, but there's it's of the top social class, the charm of the different the class system that you have. We usually get the top class, the Dharma, the charm. I don't know. That top class is the class of Indians that are usually represented here in our country. And in every different country, we really do get the best of the best. And it helps give America that qualitative edge in different industries. It allows us to be the cultural powerhouse of the world that we are. Oftentimes, the soft power influence that comes with that is a good thing. We have worldwide industries because we're taking some of the best around the world and they're exporting, our culture mixed with theirs back to their home country. So I do think there is some value to that. Also, I don't know, is there some value to us? Because I believe I'm a first generation immigrant. I don't know if you were born in India.
I was born in India. We went to school in UK. I moved here. My parents still do not live in America.
Damn, you're like poster boy for the so-called global citizen.
Yeah, I'm the poster boy for everything Steve Bannon stands for.
Damn, yeah.
You
should have him on next.
Yeah. But no, that's actually a really good point. Even within the Indian cohort, when the Zohran conversation was popping off, I know the reason I have an apathy towards the Zohran archetype because I have thousands of those in my extended family, which is I know, right? It's like they are hyper, like well educated. They come from really affluent families who, like, their parents moved to America and they make really good money. They work in either academia or the arts or like Hollywood, what have you, and they're super successful. And their kids are born here and they resent America. And the reason is quite nebulous. They hate America because they want to still get the brownie points of being like their parents coming from the third world, because in leftist culture, if you're an immigrant, you have a brownie point, right? And they can't cash in on that because they're born here. So the only way to cash in on that is just becoming a card-carrying socialist.
I believe these people are racist to their core and projecting their racist beliefs onto America. I believe deeply that Zohran Mamdani believes that America is a white supremacist country and that he needs to do everything in his power to try to so-called fix that. But I think America is a freedom-loving country, and our Constitution and the amendments written in them are a good thing. I don't think he believes in the First Amendment. I know he doesn't believe in the Second Amendment. So, I mean, I really think these people are antithetical to America and American values. And I think he helps increase xenophobic feelings among Americans. I know he's had a lot of success here in New York, but I don't think he at all represents, the Democrat or the American people writ large. He's not able to run for president because he wasn't born in America, but I know if he did, I think he'd fall right on his face. So in a sense, I wish he could run for president. So I think he could be successful here, but I don't think this is an archetype for the Democrats writ large around the country. And if they try to push somebody like this, they are going to fail.
New York is like, there is a very solid chance of like over-interpreting the mandate because it's New York at the end of the day. And to that point, when I see stuff like Zohran, what's this guy's name? Omar Fateh in Minneapolis, and them talking the way they do, and the right taking that as an example of sometimes I will say like just like spewing outright xenophobia. It is what it is. I'm not saying that I'm supporting for either of those people, but the point being like they 100% do a disservice to, let's call it the quote unquote first generation immigrant here, and then be like they're bringing their culture here and have like, all that conversation happens. And I'm saying like that only happens in their little cohort. And I don't think that's the bigger capitally Democratic Party, which is super interesting. Like right now, there's the Pete Buttigieg wing of the party. Let's call it the Ezra Klein abundance movement.
Let's call them liberals.
Let's call it liberals.
And then I'd call Zohran a leftist or socialist.
Yeah, I think that's
an important distinction to make.
That's a very important distinction, and it arguably could be the Tea Party moment within the capitally Democratic movement. Like the Tea Party within the Republican movement happened in a time where the party wasn't ready for populism.
So to steal your buddy Sagar and who does he co-host that show
Crystal.
with? The realignment I think is happening.
And Marshall.
And Marshall Kossoff. I like Marshall Kossoff. I think he does a great job. But I think to like quote the name of their show, there is a realignment going on.
Yeah.
Who knows how much longer these liberals will be able to continue having a party with the other leftists and share that party. And I think we're also seeing some civil war dynamics in the Republican Party. Yeah. I think it's been fascinating how President Trump as a politician was able to wrangle all these different groups on the right and to run one cohesive, campaign behind so many of these disparate forces, people who are super anti-immigrant, people who are pro-life, but his campaign wasn't necessarily pro-life. People who are pro-Israel, but sometimes people who are also anti-Israel, and like a business community, and then also managed to like capture this populist energy, and all those groups are sort of disparate. JD Vance and Marco Rubio's politics are so different, but we're seeing them united under President Trump. I don't know if we'll see somebody who's able to unite the right, I hate to use that phraseology, like that in the future. And I think the Democrats are going to have an issue like that too, where there is no one person who's going to be able to unite all these disparate factions. And maybe we'll see, like Marshall Kossoff says, a realignment in the parties.
Before I get into that, Marshall is the only black Jewish guy I know.
That's crazy, dude. When I met him and he mentioned that he was Jewish, I thought he was fucking with me.
No, he was Jewish.
I was like, oh yeah, okay. Real funny, buddy. I don't know, we're doing the Jewish jokes. Yeah, okay. Yeah, me too. Yeah, okay. Like, whatever, bro.
But I think to that realignment, I think there was this realization within the MAGA right, like, hey, what are the load-bearing columns within the Republican Party today, right? And that today is, first of all, being anti-woke. Like, hey, those blue-haired people, those pronouns people, we are not that. Immigration, obviously, and just being fuck you patriotic.
Those are important things, but I think the more important issues to pay attention to is the issues in which President Trump evolved on that are different from what the old Republican Party was. And two things that stand out to me the most is pro-gay. Like, he's generally Scott Bessent. Yeah. I'm not breaking any news here. No, Scott Bessent is gay. There's another couple. There's like Rick Grinnell is also gay. Yeah. There's a lot of high-ranking out Trump officials, and this wouldn't have been the case in any previous Republican administration. They would have to be there are others, by the way, that are closeted. I don't need to run down the list, but let's just say there are a lot of gay people, open and not, in the Trump administration, and I think that's totally different than what you would have thought the Republican Party was years ago. And also, like, the almost complete abandonment of the abortion issue. I love to talk to pro-life people about it because they're some of the most fervent Trump supporters, but it's like, dude, Trump totally abandoned this issue. Sending it back to the states, most states where most people of the country live in have very liberal abortion laws. And then there's the abortion pill that is continuously able to be mailed, which is how most people are getting abortions nowadays. And he just totally abandoned this issue while being able to maintain the pro-life part of the party. So those issues I think are really huge, because on the Democrat side, their big issues was the abortion issue where Trump effectively defanged them on. Now there's all these gay people in around Trump's cabinet. So it's like, he has just as much gay people around as the Democrats do.
If you go on a CPAC, you would see many such cases.
Dude, I mean, it's just, there are a lot of gay power players in Republican politics.
Fucking sharks,
for one reason or another.
Dude, I know. Do you think that cultural ship has sailed for Republicans? Because I don't know if you know this, like, there's this term called barstool conservatism. Something I kind of sort of align with. I am a normal city guy who also leans right. I don't wake up thinking about abortion or religious issues. I think mostly about immigration, trade, wokeism, cultural stuff. I think that is the lowest common denominator Republican voter, and that was arguably the reason they were pushed across the finish line vis-a-vis last election. And I think that's okay.
Dude, I think this is an ego stroke for people who think of themselves as so-called barstool conservatives. I mean, in their actual politics, I think they're like libertarian light. What are their effective politics? They're cool with abortions in case they knock a girl up, and they like smoking pot, so they want pot to be legalized. And I don't really know where it goes,
I guess.
And vaguely anti-woke, and think trans people are kind of weird. But I mean, I think there's a huge consensus on that already. I think this is like a toot your own horn kind of thing if you're involved in so-called barstool conservatism in one way or another. I think we're overlooking like the main constituents. No, I don't think, like these, I mean, look, it's important to have young Trump supporters, young people support Trump. And I think people like Charlie Kirk are doing a great job of that and getting these people involved. But still, writ large, young people are like the least politically involved people. And I think Gen Z still, like over 50% of them still voted for the Democrats. It's important to make dents in that, but I think like, I'm I don't think it's very conservative either. I think this is over exaggerated to make people feel good about recording videos and podcasts and having the president come on, which is awesome for the people who do. I haven't, but like,
shout out Nelk Boys, I guess. What do you think? What a version of that can be also applied to the tech class?
Sure.
We worked we still do. We worked in media when censorship was awry, and
dude, it sucked.
Facebook looks very different now. Instagram definitely looks very different right now than it did during Trump v1. Zuckerberg had a different tone when he was testifying at the Congress. Compare him to a couple of months ago where he was on Rogan wearing a black t-shirt and a gold chain, cosplaying a right-wing bro. The question is, what do you think these people actually fundamentally believe in anything?
One quick note on Meta and Instagram before I get into that. Dude, ever since the president got elected, my reels is just
Nick Fuentes.
Funny racist shit. Yeah. It's only like Family Guy level funny racist shit, mostly against Indians and Jews. That's that's all my reels are. So I think and I don't know if that's good for business because Meta stock's been popping. But dude, so much anti.
I own Meta stocks. Whatever works,
dude, I don't know, man, because there's all right. I think these people are just trying to do what's best for their business. Zuckerberg's looking after his bottom line. I think it was fascinating that all of these characters were at the president's inauguration. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos,
Sundar Pichai.
Yeah, I usually forget his name. So I think these people are falling in line and looking not to get screwed by the big swing of the government. Once it comes around, they're trying to be in President Trump's best favor. So I think they're trying to avoid getting screwed. All of these different companies have so many different interests within the government and government contracts, and they're like different lawsuits. A lot of these governments that now Trump's DOJ has control over the direction of. I think Amazon, and I know a few other of these players. You could look into the specific lawsuits, but they're just trying to have friendly relations with the president for their bottom line. And I mean, hey, that's what the shareholders have them hired to do. So
what I like is that the new right has actively started questioning their relationship with the power brokers, per se. The divorce of Elon with the bigger GOP movement.
Dude, I always thought Elon was a huge grifter. I actually agree with Bannon on this. I think he liked to wear a MAGA suit, but at the end of the day, he was just interested in his business interests at the end of the day. He wants more immigration. It's antithetical, frankly, to much of the MAGA agenda. But he did a great job in buying Twitter, I guess you could say that, and bringing Trump and other MAGA figures back to the platform. And some people would say increasing free speech. So I think that played a role. But most of these guys, and especially Elon Musk, antithetical to most MAGA values, and is there just trying to gain and curry favor with the most powerful person on earth, President Trump.
It's not only like an elite critique, by the way, it's a cultural critique, because there are a lot of people like that. To your Barstool conservatism point, there's a lot significant portion of the online right are not conservative.
Totally.
They are culturally right, maybe because there's like cachet now in being anti-woke.
Anti-left.
Which is fine.
That's the coalition of the right now, is just being anti-left on these like 80-20 issues, such as on immigration and transgenderism around the country.
Woke stuff. What do you think that version looks like for the left today?
It used to be abortion. Abortion used to be the 80-20 issue for Democrats against Republicans that used to be extremely potent. That Trump really defanged, and I think gets undercovered on the right because they don't want to rub it in the pro-life people's faces, frankly. Think about that. Think about how big of an issue that was, though, in the past 5 or so years. I used to go to
pro-life marches with our in-house abortion reporter. It used to, the whole Mike Pence of it all, like that was a monolith.
I also feel like there was some denialism on the right about like, women care about their access to abortion. Like, I don't know why this is breaking news to anybody. I used to say women care more about their access to abortion than being poor. Women would rather be poor than not have access to their abortion and abortion pills and birth control pills. And like, this is a serious issue for them. And like, they genuinely care a lot about this issue. And even Republican women are like, polls test best, it's 50-50. So this was an issue really bringing down Republicans. I think there are a lot of Republican-leaning women who used to vote Democrat because of this issue in specific. And then, so I think that was the 80-20.
Do you think that ship has sailed for the right?
Being pro-life? I think that ship is sailing.
Turning the tide of the country towards being pro-life.
Oh yeah, that ship has sailed. The Republican Party has become ambivalent when it comes to abortion. As opposed to the past, you needed to be pro-life to be elected in the primaries in the Republican Party. That's not true anymore. And President Trump helped break that norm within the Republican Party. He has the opportunity to push a lot further on abortion, but instead he nominated the most pro-choice HHS secretary, RFK Jr., that a Republican president's ever had. So that's the state of abortion play in our country.
That ship has sailed, and he has punted it to the states, which is kind of sort of status quo. I think it's fair to say the majority strain of the under 40 voter is a populist one. For the right, it is a protectionist one, being anti-trade, anti-immigration. On the left, it is redistribution vis-a-vis Zohran. What do you think that tension looks like come next presidential cycle? Because there's no longer that neoliberal base within the young voter.
Yeah, I think the mixing of politics and the internet have, drawn people more to the so-called extremes. I don't know how extreme people really are in reality.
Horseshoe theory.
Yeah, and I don't know how much I really again, I struggle with this isn't real life. I spend most of my time on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and I struggle to see like the real life connections between the two. So it's hard to take what I see online from what I perceive to be young people and like project something out of that. Dude, I don't believe shit I read online. I don't believe anything I see on Twitter. Twitter, Instagram, YouTube are making you actively dumber. Like they're taking IQ points off of you right now. And you're most likely reading wrong information on Twitter and Instagram. Like what you're reading is usually a blatant lie, extremely misleading. That's what gets the clicks and plays online. And like, so I struggle to really understand how people really feel or what they really know and understand from the media that they are consuming. Media literacy is at an all-time low.
It's so low.
And
it's concerningly low.
There are so many different influence campaigns, both foreign and domestic, that are proliferating all over these social media platforms. So many people are being paid and not disclosing it. I'm not getting paid. I'm just broke. Or well, I get paid by Tim Pool. Thank goodness for him. But so like, I think I'm having trouble seeing what's actually real and true through the lens of what I see online.
Staying on the media of it all, I like to talk about it because we existed in the right media when it kind of sort of was marginalized and not part of the, let's call it mainstream, what have you. And now it looks different. People call it podcast elections, what have you. I just think at the end of the day, the product is the same. It's at the end of it's just talk radio, but in your reels, like how does Nick Fuentes or Ben Shapiro, like the format is the same format as Rush Limbaugh. It just feels different because the format is a little bit tweaked towards mobile consumption. Where do you see the right media kind of infiltrating the ecosystem happening, and how long do you think that lasts?
It's a great question. There used to be more gatekeepers in the media space. It used to be TV networks or radio networks. You couldn't get your message out if you couldn't get hooked up with them. And then it kind of evolved to these different social media platforms. If you weren't within their confined rules, you'd get screwed over. And now it seems like Elon Musk owns Twitter, so you could say whatever the hell you want. Where we're going in the future, I think, is more of the internet trollery and a version of less serious, less thought out, less informed public. And whether that translates legitimately into our politics has yet to be seen.
I also do not want every single platform to look like 4chan.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
Also, like, I'm not even making...
Dude, I used to browse /B when I was younger, and now it's indistinguishable from Twitter. Twitter used to be like a place where I could get a lot of valid news information and follow stuff on politics, and it was nice to have that stuff separated. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of these platforms, I don't know if I'm just outing myself as having a racist algorithm. I might be, but that's all my algorithms are super racist.
Yeah, it's
all the stuff that I'm fed
is concerningly getting there.
And again, I don't know how much of this is real life or manipulated digitally, because I know people who do manipulate their numbers online to try to get a message out through marketing campaigns, through buying likes and followers, or also like audience capture is a huge thing. I don't know if people truly believe and thought out what they're saying or just saying something that they believe is popular.
You said audience capture. I'm thinking this out loud. Tell me what you think about this. Kamala outraised Trump. Cuomo outraised Zohran. In the elections where there is more attention, money matters less. In the elections where there is no attention, like a local race, money matters because you can just buy a bunch of local TV ads, door knock, what have you, and you can push through a candidate across like the finish line of a smaller race. But as the races get bigger, I think the establishment is still struggling with the fact that you can raise a shit ton of money and still not win an election because attention works differently, which is something Zohran understood, which is why he will he will be the next mayor of New York City.
Money in politics matters, of course, but hot take, I think its role in politics has been deeply exaggerated because the left likes to bitch about rich people, and it gives them an effective way of doing so. That's always the cope. As soon as they lose an election, it's, oh, they were outraised, despite losing races where they're not outraised in. If money's the only thing that matters, then Mike Bloomberg would have been our president back when he ran for president. So like there's a lot more to politics than money, but it gives losers something to point their finger at when they lose.
Staying on the Zohran of it all, do you agree he's going to win?
Oh, totally going to win. Yeah. But here's why he's going to win. Because of the egos of the three other main candidates in the race. They are not willing to consolidate. So therefore, people, if you live under a rock, or, I mean, no, not if you don't. Most people don't give a shit about New York City politics.
Lewa's going to come back and win New York City?
I don't blame people for not giving a shit about New York City politics in this mayoral election. But in short, 4 candidates, Zohran Mamdani, upstart socialist who won the Democratic mayoral primary, Eric Adams, our current mayor, Andrew Cuomo, alleged groper, former governor of New York, and Curtis Lewa, Republican in the general. The thing is, if the other 3, if Cuomo and Adams and Curtis Lewa picked one among the 3 to run against Zohran, they would win. But because each one thinks they have like a 15 or 20% chance of legitimately winning and their egos are too big, they'd rather take each other out and let Zohran win. Because that's how politicians think, and I don't necessarily blame them for it. They just think there's the slightest chance of them winning, and they're like, fuck it, I'll take it.
You know what's also corny? Each of them got a version of social media guy like Zohran, and they think like them doing vertical videos is what's gonna change the table for them.
Don't talk shit about verticals. I started to shoot just in vertical. If you guys see the detainment videos from earlier,
it's all vertical.
It's all vertical. It's all vertical.
Yeah.
Dude, I feel like it's lowest common denominator strategy that he's doing. Like Netflix quality with cameras fancier than you guys have here, quick social media videos, but I think that only works for a socialist dominant area like New York City.
Yeah.
In any normal part of the country,
they couldn't care less.
It's deeply out of touch with the people who actually live in the district.
Yeah, in like Indiana, you need a Republican who's standing outside your lawn doing this, and that's that, and that's what works. Where do you think the Zohran conversation like ends? Because it's very fair to say that the Democratic base is very truly what Zohran represents, which is
what? Say that again.
The Democratic base,
okay,
the base, yes. The voting base is yearning for someone who wants to say fuck you to the Trump takeover, and they no longer want to kowtow to like the Pete Buttigieg or the Hakeem Jeffries of the world. Like that is the energy. Like this is the progressive Tea Party movement. Do you think that's fair?
It is fair. I think these are like different parts of people in the same party. If we had more than 2 political parties in our country, 2 major political parties in our country, then we'd see them, break into multiple different parties. I think we're not going to hear the end of Zohran for some time because he's such an effective foil for the Republicans and President Trump in particular. He is a brown socialist who only recently became a naturalized citizen in our country. So I think that's the most effective foil that the Republican Party has.
Demagogue, yeah.
And in 99% of the country, the Republicans just foiling against him is going to be an extremely effective strategy because Zohran's message will only win in an area like New York City.
To the base question, what do you think the base is today?
I think the base is a bunch of far-left socialists. I think it's the Zohran Mamdani type. Whether that's enough of the party to take over the older generation has yet to be seen. I think we're going to see a civil war and realignment before that happens.
Do you think you have a bias of a sample size because you've spent so much time at campus protests?
Maybe, but also like within our representative government, like we don't have the squad is what, a half dozen members at this point, and a lot of them lost in the last election cycle, re Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush. So like I think they're allowed on social media, and I question how much of the far left actually exists in our country versus just what we're seeing sometimes online. I don't think we've seen a well organized like protest movement like we have in the past that really exemplified the far left. So I don't see the moderate so-called Democrats relinquishing their power anytime soon, but I do think they will try to appropriate the left to the best of their ability, and where it goes from there, not sure.
I wanted to save my favorite J question for you for the last one. The MAGA base right now, the younger MAGA base, is obviously at a point where they vehemently want to question anything which is remotely relevant to Israel. You're Jewish. I've known you for a while. And it's pretty fair to say that it's a recent development within the Republican base, because Republican interests and Israeli interests have all been synonymous for the longest time. What are you making of this reckoning?
I think support for Israel among both parties was very high for a long time, and we're seeing a pushback in both parties. I think the pushback among Democrats is the one for people who are pro-Israel to be more concerned about, because I think that's infiltrating a lot deeper than the anti-Israel sentiment in the Republican Party. I believe there's always an element of people on the right. There's always an element of the population who don't like Jewish people. I don't want to sound like a lib when I say this, but they're just generally anti-Semitic. That's always existed on the right, on the far right. David Duke characters, or their, and their influences on the right has always been fairly limited. I feel as though on the right, it's talked about more than it manifestly exists. It exists, but to a much smaller degree than it does exist on the left. I don't believe the Democrat will be a pro-Israel party within the next 20 years, but I foresee the majority of Republicans staying pro-Israel into the foreseeable future.
Why do you think the younger people have started talking about this?
There's a lot of different aspects of it. I think there are people who are turning away from the United States being the global hegemon, the idea that the United States should stay the global hegemon, and Israel's a part of that. There are people who, again, don't like that we supply money and weapons abroad, that believe it could be better spent here. I'd argue that we could walk and chew gum at the same times. So I do think there's an element of anti-Semitism to it. I think there is an element of memery to it. But I can't exactly put my finger on it, actually.
Does that make you think differently about the right in general?
I don't think the right's a monolith. So I think it's a much bigger issue on the left, but despite how much
bigger issue, meaning the left has
much more bigger, anti-Israel contingent to it. Yes, and are more militantly anti-Israel in how they behave. So, for example, there was a chapter of the PSL, or I think it's socialist groups in DC, that recently murdered 2 Israeli diplomats. And I feel like the way that the left justifies violence against Jews and making calls for an intifada, or saying that, that any terrorism essentially against Israelis is justified because all of them are settlers and they're just liberating themselves, and you cannot judge the way that they resist, so-called resist, which is terrorism. I don't think we see that manifestly on the right. I think when people on the left are anti-Israel, it's because they're either Muslims and support and have affinity for other Muslims in the Middle East. I think it's because Israel's coded as right-wing and white. Most people on the left just hate anything that's coded white or right-wing. So on the left, they think of Israel as a bunch of white people oppressing a bunch of brown people, and it's that simple for them. But I don't think there's a deep ideological basis for this on the right as much as there is on the left. Israel's, a capitalist country.
Let me package that. So what you're saying is basically it's an extension of the cultural Marxism, which is anytime there is an oppressor and an oppressed, the left will always take the side of the oppressor.
Sure. I'd argue that perceived oppressor and oppressed.
Perceived. Okay, that's fair.
Because it's always...
it's more nuanced than that. So anytime you're looking at anyone who's perceived to been going through a rough time, vis-a-vis Gaza, this poor tiny little country is being oppressed by this bigger country which gets a shit ton of money from the US. So why the fuck will we not take the side of David instead of Goliath?
Exactly.
And that's the vision. You are right in saying that there is no version of that on the right, which is structural, but I still think I do not want to underplay the memory of it all.
Yeah, what I'll say on the right wing part, I'm confident that many people on the far right will be more bigoted towards Muslims than they will be to Jews. How about that, Sagnik?
That's fair. I think you brown and Muslim versus white and Jew, I think they will take the brown and Muslim. All right, the end. Elaad, thank you.
I don't know.